Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Gang Saves Humanity. My name is James Ellers. As always, we are here with the amazing Heidi. Say hi, Heidi.
Hey, guys.
Vets for Yang. Awesome. And today we are joined by Jonathan Herzog. Jonathan is a candidate in New York's 10th District. You could find him at Herzog. I'm saying it right? Herzog?
Yeah.
Just making sure. Herzog2020.com. Jonathan, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So exciting. Congrats to you guys on this freaking amazing setup you got going.
Yeah.
I love it. The gang saves humanity indeed. I'm Jonathan Herzog, born and raised in New York's 10th District, which is the west side of Manhattan and South Brooklyn in New York. I am Yang Gang, and I'm running for Congress in New York on the very simple premise that Yang Gang goes to Congress.
That's awesome. We need more Yang Gang in Congress, and we need more Yang Gang running for Congress, because I'm a firm believer that the best way to learn how to do something is just to do it. So I just got done running out here in California. It's
yes,
8th District.
Congratulations to you. Thank you for fighting that fight.
Yeah. The hindsight, the turnout for the Democrats was a lot lower than the Republicans. It was about Republicans was 49% versus 42%. So that's something we need to work on. But so tell us, how's the race going? I know you've been running on UBI. You announced in August. How has the conversation around UBI changed from then until now? I feel like more people would be a lot more open to it right now.
Yeah, well, it's been great. We actually just made the ballot, which is super exciting. Here in New York, it's a pretty hefty threshold. Back when we were collecting to get Yang on the ballot, we had to get 40,000 signatures across the state.
Good Lord.
In the dead of winter. And so we have made the ballot, which is super exciting. And yeah, as you said, it's kind of wild, but it has tragically taken this crisis to bring what was politically impossible and make it seemingly potentially inevitable, where Justin Amash and Romney and maybe Steve Mnuchin and maybe AOC and Rashida and the Yang Gang is growing, it seems. with some permutations, here and there. But yeah, people are definitely recognizing that we are onto something tragically more and more necessary and urgent than ever.
Okay. So real quick, how are you? How are things going? Like, I know you're in Manhattan. I follow Andrew's Twitter, and it sounds like it's pretty desolate. How are things there?
It's kind of wild. New York is in many ways like the kind of ground zero, in part because of just like the population density and the geography and like the amount of transit. And so it's kind of crazy. And we're also seeing how, like, as you said, like every different jurisdiction, every different state is operating in like a totally different level of whether it's total shutdown or lockdown or limitations and self-quarantines. And so we're kind of seeing how this patchwork is playing out. But yeah, New York City is definitely very quiet compared to what it usually is. I can't even
imagine what that's like. That must be like spooky.
It's crazy, yeah.
And how's that affecting your campaign? How have you adjusted your campaign to be able to do? I imagine you have to do a lot more remotely, right? How are you changing your campaign to be able to operate right now?
Yeah, so basically it is entirely 100% online and digital. Now, like, this is a tragedy so far beyond like a campaign or, even like any of our campaigns. But like, in terms of the nitty gritty for how it gets done, it is in some ways like the Yang Yang strength, because out of necessity as well, when we got shut out from all the mainstream like sense-making institutions, a la the media, we paved a path and like made our voice heard other ways. And so we are digitally native, digitally savvy across platforms, and aren't dependent on the same types of like traditional campaigning that a lot of other campaigns are. So it's a very strange moment, but definitely, you know, still all hands on deck and ready to do this thing.
So you guys are like primarily phone banking and things like that?
So for the past couple of weeks, it has been an all-out onslaught of just getting on the ballot. So I'll give you some like what that looked like. So I would basically get out, do like 14 hours in the streets of New York, like stand in the subways, stand outside Trader Joe's, just like traverse the entire city to get thousands of signatures, which have to be done in person by registered Democrats who live in the district, and all these rules. So that was sort of the intensive like last phase. But now we're like pivoting full force to texting and social media across all platforms, and we don't know, but the primary may be entirely vote by mail too. So it's going to kind of unfold and kind of grow from here.
Okay,
yeah,
so when is your primary?
What's that?
When is the primary?
Yeah, so it is June 23rd.
Okay.
June 23rd.
Okay,
Nice.
so with any luck, we will not be, well, I mean, if Donald Trump has his way, we won't be quarantined next week. But so with any luck, do you think that you guys might be voting in person, or do you think it'll probably be like by mail?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to tell. I think like if we had like full scale like federal national suppression strategy, like we actually potentially could get through this by then. But as you said, like, you know, when the proposal or one proposal on the table is like, let's reopen business as usual, like that is not a good sign, because that means like we're going to see continual upticks. So it's gonna, you know, evolve. I don't know.
Wow.
So right off the bat, why don't you tell us where people can follow you, where they can donate to you, and where they can go if they want to volunteer for you? Would that be your website?
Totally, yeah. So it is Herzog2020.com. Oh, amazing. It's right there. Super cool.
Queued up.
Oh, James.
And then I guess the Twitter handle is Jonathan Herzog 5. And then and there's Instagram, there's Facebook, but yeah, the website is the best place to sign up to volunteer and to chip in any way that you can. Emphasis on can, because right now I know we all need to take care and like put, you know, our health and our safety first.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's again, coming off a congressional race, I want to advocate as much as possible where if people are able, willing to either pitch in monetarily, or I'm guessing a lot of people have a lot more time on their hands, to people that help with text bank or phone banking, anything like that. It is so important to do that for these campaigns, especially for these grassroots campaigns that we need all hands on deck, because unfortunately the reality is a lot of these incumbents have a lot of money behind them, and to beat those people, we need all the manpower and, you know, everybody on board as possible. So definitely go check out Herzog2020.com. If you could donate. If you can volunteer. If you could just share it on social media, do that. Anything will help. So back to the topic of UBI, because I've been asking questions based on, you know, running a campaign. Sorry. Back on the topic of UBI. I mean, I know like when I first started running and when I first discovered Andrew Yang, a lot of it was just about, you know, freedom, right? Giving people a lot more ability to do what they want, do what their passions are. Now we're getting into the point where it's necessary for just living at all. You know what I mean? Like it's to the point of just survival.
Things have changed, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And what's your opinion? I mean, what can we do to help you get this message out? Because like the message was super important before, but now it can save lives literally to this point. So what can we do to help you get that message out?
Yeah, geez. Well, first of all, I mean, thank you guys, because what you're doing, right, by spreading the word and having these conversations and being vocal and active and like running yourself, right, like that is all huge and like moves the ball forward. I think one of the goals is to have a wave of Freedom Democrats, like basically just Yang Gang, running in districts across the country. Because one of the things we see now is like there's a Justice Democrat basically running in every seat. And they grew out of Bernie's loss in 2016 and a sense of, well, we need to challenge, in the case of Justice Democrats, highly and safely democratic districts with multi-decade incumbents where progressive ideas can catch hold, but they just haven't even had a choice in some cases 2 or 3 decades. And so Justice Democrats, they ran like dozens, scores of candidates, and they only had like a handful of wins. But those are the huge, like splash on the scene wins that have driven the entire fucking narrative for now, like what, 3 years? Where you can't go anywhere. You can't go anywhere without hearing about basically Bernie's agenda, right? From Medicare for all and banning private insurance to the $15 minimum wage to the Green New Deal. In many ways, they have defined the entire narrative and the progressive agenda, in part through these like high impact wins on the congressional level. And so there's so many ways, and there's so many different scales and scope depending on where we are and like how we are. Even chipping into organizations like Humanity Forward and Give Directly that are just giving cash directly to people in need, and taking care of yourself and your family first. But if you're able to run and even thinking about it, then like please do it. And part of the goal is to like help support and reduce the barriers to entry, and like the activation energy around running, because incumbents and politicians, they only change and only respond to when they have an incentive to. So there's so many ways of activism and kind of raising our voice, and having a channel like this is a great step in that direction. But running yourself if you can, or supporting our effort, if you're able to. It's all happening digitally, so we can all freaking do this through our self-quarantines and actually win. That's the madness.
Your race, I think there's 8 people. Is that what we saw when we looked it up? Are there any other UBI candidates in your race?
Yeah, so there were about 8 who had declared and filed, but actually now with the ballot access process, there will only be likely 2 or 3 of us on the ballot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the only UBI candidate.
Yeah. So basically,
you are uniquely positioned to, possibly really push your platform with basically what's going on in the country and in the world right now.
Yeah, so it's kind of wild. So we have the incumbent, a 30-year incumbent who's like the number 2 power player in Democratic politics today. Then you have a Bernie challenger, just like a Bernie type challenger. And then you got us. So like we are in the mix. We are at the table.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to ask, are you in touch with Humanity Forward?
So I'm not. I think right now they're like first and foremost focused on like getting cash to people who need it right now. But like the numbers are kind of crazy. Like I know we're all like a data number like centric group. Like we literally win the congressional seat on the west side of Manhattan, New York's 10th seat, if we get 15,000 votes, which is 2%. Really? Yeah, it's 2% of the entire population, because the primary is on June 23rd and only 3 to 4% of all people vote.
Wow.
30,000 people out of 750,000 people vote in the congressional primary. So if we get 15,000 votes, because it's such a safely Democratic seat, then we have won the seat.
That's awesome.
So, and that definitely seems like a race that Humanity Forward would be interested in. Just in my opinion, I don't know what their criteria is, but you sound like you have a pretty good chance.
And if you look at the like polling of freaking like Yang Gang in New York, we're at like 2 to 4% as is. So if you take our base as like Yang Gang plus, right, and just build on top of that, again, it's like we can put up wins on the board.
That's exciting.
So Heidi, use your connections and put it in their ear.
He has the same connections that I do.
Okay, well,
Heidi's a power player.
I know y'all have more connections than I do, so just get it hooked up. Do you know? Because this is something else I thought was interesting when I was looking, like in hindsight, looking back at the voting. Like in my area, it was like 3 times more people voted by mail than they did in person. So do you think that? And this is just off the top of my head, like if it moves to a completely mail-in ballot, do you think that'll increase the number of people actually turning out?
It's very tricky. I think it may unfortunately decrease it for what's already a historically like depressed turnout. So just for there's only been basically one primary in 30 years. And he's never faced like a serious competitive challenge in his entire career. And yeah, I have the sense that it will like decrease turnout because it's actually a lot of steps to like request an absentee ballot, to get the ballot, to send the ballot, have a freaking stamp. Like, so it's like a lot of hurdles. You have to be very committed, which again, like we have a very passionate crew.
Okay, so I'll redirect that question. How do we get more people turned out? Because that's the issue. I think it's across the board where I feel like the message of, like you said, Freedom Democrats and Andrew Yang and everything, I think it would appeal to a huge group. It's just getting the message out and then getting them to the point of actually coming out to vote. You know, we've talked about a lot up to maybe a month or two ago. A lot of people were looking at Bernie's playbook and saying, hey, we need to follow Bernie's playbook to get all this progress. But then you look at, the actual people, like, okay, they'll talk about them, but when it comes to actually turning out,
they don't vote.
They don't. You know what I mean? So what would you think, like, what would you say is a way that we not only get people passionate, but get them to the point of actually making sure they get out and vote? Because I think that's a real big thing that we need to work on between now and just,
it probably might be like a good thing for the incumbent, something like this, because there's the extra hassle of having to obtain the mail-in ballot. And as we saw, or at least as Bernie saw, the youth really didn't turn out. So adding an extra layer of having to get a mail-in ballot, I don't know. So what can we do to make sure, because our Yang, our supporters are, tend to skew younger as well. So what can we do? How can we help you?
Yeah, gosh. Okay. So a lot of questions baked in there, all really interesting. So I think one thing that might be a little bit different, and again, I know it's literally just been a couple of weeks and we've all sort of been this like crazy wave of like depression, denial, grief, like the recovery, all of it. But but like we are in a fundamentally different moment where UBI itself and like the different angles of support, at least for some sort of universal cash transfer, is really like at the precipice. Like that's unprecedented. And like, it just shows like how critical and pivotal and sacrificial every single step, like, everyone along the way. Like I remember you, Heidi, like, being like freaking driving around in the Yang mobile, like every single thing, every single sacrifice that was so painful in the moment really has potentially saved seriously lives, because like for the idea to be at the fore and at the mainstream now is not something that we could have taken for granted. So that in itself is something like we have to like recognize, celebrate, and like, be grateful for all of that real human sacrifice that got us to where we are now, which is like a fundamentally different moment. And so that's one thing where, like, I know one of the comment refrains after the Yang, campaign in the kind
you froze.
We lost him.
All right, you froze for a second. You froze for a second. You said after the Yang, and then it cut off. So one of the refrains after the Yang thing, ...
Okay. sorry, was that like people liked him, people loved him, but that didn't necessarily translate to votes, right? I think in this moment when people are realizing that things are crumbling, the institutions are not just theoretically falling apart. It's not just, you know, someone yelling like Chicken Little, right? Like
automation, and they're not really seeing it. They are actually seeing it right now. So yeah, you have a very good point.
Yeah, and it's like on a very human level where it's like my mom or my aunt or my neighbor or my, you know, it's like people are seeing this on a scale where there's a step of like you know, okay, maybe this is happening to others, or this is an issue that, you know, some people face and people who are, you know, having harder times, but this is everyone.
That's
and
true.
So I think there is something structural and different about this moment that lets even the high propensity, like older, you know, voters be more open to the fact they're like, wait, I'm freaking quarantined at home. Someone has to out of the goodness of their heart maybe deliver me groceries so I can, you know, not be on a ventilator. Like we're in a different place structurally.
Yeah, and that brings up, I mean, because when Yang is running, a lot of people's thing was like, I don't think he's serious. Like, and again, I don't think there was just that connection between his policies and then real life. And then a month later, you know, this happens, and it's like, holy shit, everything he was talking about was absolutely spot on, and it's here a lot sooner than anyone can ever. Like even hardcore Yang, like I never thought it'd be like 2 months later that it's completely necessary and we need it right away. Like it's almost prophetic. Like it's crazy how that happened.
Yeah, and I think to that, like one thing I want to make sure is, you know, I don't want us to just like feel vindicated and like, oh, we like saw it ahead of, like, I want us to actually that be able to go in, to sit at the table, to solve the problem so that like we avert the next one. Right. It's like one thing to be like, aha, like we got it. But like, it's another thing to actually get in there and solve this shit from the inside. Yeah.
And that's like spot on. My thought wasn't like, hey, vindicate. It's like, holy shit, we have to do way more, way faster.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm not even running anymore. So like, again, thank you for what you're doing, because I know how hard it is to go from zero to, I mean, just people don't understand. Again, a lot of what I say in reference to running for office, a lot of it makes you kind of sound like conspiracy theorists, just how a lot of it's built out just to support either the establishment or people with money, just getting on the ballot. You know what I mean? Like, how many signatures did you have to get? How many signatures did you have to get out there to get on the ballot?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So the legal minimum for congressional candidates in New York is 1,250 in normal times. And so then the kind of thing you have to do is basically aim for 5,000, because petitions get challenged. And actually, as you said, like a lot of this happens behind the scenes in closed doors in court. And so it's literally lawyers like playing these games, determining who gets on the ballot and who isn't. Because like the easiest way to beat someone is just by having them not be a choice.
Yeah.
And so then, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well, no, especially if you're running against an incumbent that has their hands in these certain things, you know what I mean? So that's why, like, again, it's so important to have people run and to take that knowledge and give it to the next people, you know, because I had a call this morning with someone that's running in 2022 already, just trying to direct him in the right way. So like, we need more people doing these things, because again, it's not something that, hey, automation is going to be taking away jobs in 10 or 20 years. It's like, hey, there are things right now that are making universal basic income a complete necessity, and we need people in office that aren't going to play the political bullshit games that they're playing right now. Because I don't know about you, I'm super frustrated about what's going on right now, and especially having to self-quarantine. It's like, how do you get your voice out there to a point where you can actually make a huge impact? So again, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, both of you, Heidi, you're everywhere too. You know,
I'm not running for office ever.
We'll get you there. We'll get you there.
South Dakota, we have one representative, and that seat is literally like reserved for people like, 20 years, 30 years in advance. So if ever I say I'm running for Congress, don't vote for me. Don't send me any money. There's like, it's just a vanity run. Don't do it. So no, I'm never running for office, but I'm super excited about people like you, Jonathan, because just talking to you, I'm so excited that you clearly have a chance. I mean, I don't know why. I wasn't trying to doubt you, but sometimes I'll see people that are they've announced their run, and to me, it's kind of like if I did, like, oh, that's great, but I'll never, it's never going to happen, right? And then I hear your story, and you actually have a chance, and I'm so excited about that. So I'm glad you came to talk to us. I'm glad you're running, and I really just want to help you however I can, however James and I can. So
sure. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I have to say, like, please don't sell yourself freaking short, because the unlikeliest candidate of all, I've like said this like a million times, but like literally the unlikeliest candidate of all was this random guy named Andrew Yang, who went from nothing, anonymity, to like top 5 presidential candidate, now driving the policy conversation like for this era. And so like that was truly one of the most unlikely cases.
Still, don't send me money because it's still South Dakota.
Now I want to get you to run for office. Like, that's one of my goals in life, is to get Heidi run.
I just want to see him lose.
I know now it has to happen.
Doesn't have to be Congress. I mean, it could be like a mayor of somewhere. Mayor Heidi. See, we'll do it. We'll get it.
It's still South Dakota. South Dakota is very red. It's very
great.
With that attitude. Just
it's very conservative. So
that's where I ran, but again, it was still. I mean, that's the thing though, is that people. I'm not saying just you, Heidi. I'm just saying in general, because I've had the same thoughts before, and just running for office gets the message out so much more, just by being on the ballot. Which is crazy, because I would go to these forums and I would talk to all these different news agencies, things like that, and it's such a good tool to get the conversation out there and get people to talk about things that they're not even talking about. I mean, Andrew Yang said it himself, like, hey, my goal is to get these policies in the conversation, get them passed, even if it's not with me. And right now, you can literally see, hey, everybody's talking about his policies. So Heidi, we will get you on the ballot sometime. And we'll get Jonathan in there.
Talk me into it.
And so, Jonathan, you're working on. Have you worked on? I've heard you say that you guys are going to work on like actually writing policies, even like doing the drafting of policies. And you went to school, like you were in Harvard Law School. Like, you're a super smart guy. Are you working on writing any of these policies right now, or where are you in the process of that?
Yeah, so that's the plan. And again, like, if I can add any tiny smidgen of value to like this whole freaking movement, it's like, at least in this space, is just right. Like at some point, right? Like, these policies have to just be written on paper. Yeah. So we can like draft them, pass them, like get co-sponsors, build the coalition. And so, yeah, I mean, over basically the next 3-4 weeks, the plan is to actually like put it on paper. So there's something we can say, like, here's the Freedom Dividend Act. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, it's like, as you put it, it really is a matter of it becoming a part of people's consciousness, like they take for granted that just like there's a Justice Democrat running on Bernie's agenda wherever they go. And by the way, they are scared. They are scared when a Justice Democrat runs. If you look at like recently, Marie Newman just won against Dan Lipinski. Jessica Cisneros in Texas was another Justice Democrat. The establishment sends tens of millions of dollars and all of their best people to come campaign for those incumbents. So they are scared when Justice Democrats run. And the reality is, like, those are the incentives that they respond to.
Yeah, and that's something else we need to build out, which I'm trying to figure out where to build out, because the whole Justice Democrat system, that they have built out, I'd like to have some support system like that for us, but I'm trying to also figure out like, hey, what's Humanity Forward doing? Not to step on their toes. So that's something else, because again, just getting on the ballot is a whole thing in itself, and could be very it'd be either a negative experience or a positive experience, depending on, if you have some help. Like if we're able to get people to run, Heidi, and then give them the help to say, hey, you do A, B, and C to get on the ballot, versus, I don't know about you, but I was literally Googling stuff to try to get on the ballot.
100%.
Yeah, and that's something we need to build out. So any input on your side of how we can support not only Andrew Yang and Humanity Forward, but also on the ground level, because like you said, they're really they're going to be busy with a lot of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I'm trying to go ahead.
Totally. And I think that we all kind of had that similar mindset. But I will note that after in the wake of 2016, Bernie's campaign formally had set up Our Revolution, which was also like a 501c4 nonprofit.
Yeah.
Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress were then kind of separate. It was like just volunteer organizers and like a bankroller who set that up. And so the organizations had like different functions. Some of them were kind of overlapping, but like there is, at least over the past couple of years, precedent for like a number of organizations coming up with slightly different goals. It's like whether you're targeting heavily Democratic districts and Democratic incumbents, or supporting people in deeply red areas to kind of flip those seats, or supporting people, down ballot in local races. So like all of these things can happen simultaneously.
Right. And that's one thought. That's because I was forming Forward United before Andrew Yang announced his thing. So now I was like, okay, one thing I really want to do is something like that. But and again, this is just me brainstorming with y'all. But one of my things is that we have so much diversity in the Yang Gang that I've been approached from independents, Republicans, Democrats, people that are all interested on getting on a ballot. So my thought is we need something similar. Like we need to support people that are pro UBI, pro Humanity First, regardless of like what party they're in, as long as they're kind of, you know what I mean? And that's kind of the angle where I think we need to make sure to support people, because again, Yang Gang's so diverse that I think there's a lot of opportunity there that we could support people from all parties and then go from there. So
I love it. I mean, I've heard people say like, we should have freedom Republicans, freedom independents, freedom libertarians, freedom Democrat, and so I think to your point, like our reach and our potential is even bigger because we're not like siloed. We're not stuck within a particular party.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's something, if anybody else has any input, I'd be much appreciated, because that's the other thing we are working on right now, is just trying to, like you said, move this movement forward any way possible. You know what I mean? It was Heidi's idea to have this podcast, which again, thank you, Heidi. You're awesome. We'll get you in a seat somewhere soon. And, just as many places as possible. We'll get Jonathan in there soon. I mean, I think you're younger than me, right? Like we'll get people in these seats, and then, anybody that is just thinking about running for office, just do it. Reach out to us. Reach out to people that are doing or have done it, and we will give you as much help as possible. But again, the first thing is just getting on the ballot, and then go from there. Like it's not as intimidating as it looks right now. So that's my rant again.
I love it. I love it.
So Jonathan, what else are you're running for Congress? You're working on a lot of things right now. I mean, tell us some other things that you're passionate about running on, or that you're working on that our audience would want to hear.
Totally. Yeah. So I think one thing as well is, to your point, and I feel like there's lots of these different efforts kind of percolating out there. Yeah. But I think one of the goals, as you said, like I put up this tweet thread recently, which just kind of laid out the like Google researching and kind of mistake process I'd made up front. Yeah. And it was like, here's where to go to set up your bank account. Here's where to go to set up your IRS EIN account. Here's where to go to set up your ActBlue. And just kind of like, I think one of the goals over the coming months is to really streamline and simplify and literally have like a one pager.
Yeah.
And even do it like state by state, and then depending on the kind of race you're running.
Yeah.
So it's just like a go-to guide as like a Kickstarter. Because even simple things like, let's say, opening up a bank account to accept donations is surprisingly very, very complicated.
I've had this same people come to me like, these banks will not open accounts for me. And I've literally told people like, listen, get your EIN, get the business employee ID number, take it in there, say you're opening up a business account, and then go from there. Because a lot of people just, I don't know. It's just weird how
EIN for a bank account for running for office.
Yeah, there's a lot of things because you need that. You need the IRS Form 1 and 2. I mean, that's all even just to open up an Act Blue account as a candidate. So again, there's so many different things. But again, I'll try to find the thread you're talking about, because we definitely need things like that. You know, just to have people less discouraged about trying to run for office, and that it is super doable, and we are going to build out a support system. That's awesome. So sorry, I cut off your thought process there.
Oh, no. Yeah, I love it. Yes. And then one other a little bit separate thing is I'm a teaching fellow for this course at Harvard on progressive alternatives and institutional reconstruction. And it's just like a fancy way. It's like a legal philosophy, political philosophy class that I think the Yang would find fascinating. So there's this philosopher called Roberto Unger. And I actually came to him a little bit later, before I thought about UBI, and then, after I heard about UBI, after I heard about Yang. But I think a lot of his principles and the theory of what he talks about really underpins like Yangism and all that we've been fighting for. And I think I've like searched for some sort of like theoretical grounding for what we're doing and what our movement is about. And reading his work and listening to him and like helping teach his class has really helped me kind of isolate a couple of factors in my mind. One example being like, we fight for deep freedom as opposed to shallow equality. And I think one way to operationalize that is we fight for a universal basic income as opposed to a federal jobs guarantee, right? Mm-hmm. So we're fighting to raise the floor, not lower the ceiling. We're not saying like burn millionaires and billionaires at the stake, but we're saying we should raise the floor and eradicate abject poverty. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a couple of like really fundamental differences in how you approach policy and politics that I found really like helpful to me in kind of grounding what we do and fight for like day in, day out.
Okay, who was that philosopher again? I want James to put up on the screen, because this conversation just got super interesting. So,
yes.
What was the name?
His name is Roberto Unger.
Last name Unger.
Unger. Yeah.
Yang Gang, that is your assignment after you watch this podcast, is to Google Roberto Unger.
And thank you for simplifying for that for some of us. The name of the course. Awesome.
I think he's like freaking awesome, and he has a lot of good like YouTube content too, so you can like listen to it on 1.5 or 2x speed or whatever, at least. But I think it really gives like a really like solid, stable ground to like support what we're fighting for every day.
That's awesome. So again, that's Roberto Unger. And that's awesome, because that's a lot of the things we need to compile, like in addition to multiple organizations that are all focused on the same thing, and also really getting down a little bit of diversity of where our philosophies are coming from. Like, because don't get me wrong, Andrew Yang's awesome. But when you're literally just spouting off things from the same exact person, some people, it just sounds good to have it coming from a few different sources. So that's awesome. So Roberto Unger, I'll put that up one more time for everyone. Awesome. We are going to look him up. And then, yes, homework. We're going to have a quiz next week on Roberto Unger. We'll go from there. And
Okay,
then go ahead.
can I want to take it back a little bit. So we both worked
Sure.
for the campaign, apparently.
Yeah,
Crazy,
right?
Yeah, I know. I think that, when did you leave? You left in August, was it?
No, it was like so I left school in late 2018 and then left the campaign like mid 2019.
And that was
So
to
yeah.
start your campaign. Okay. No, I don't get to talk to a lot of other campaign alumni, so I was pretty excited. So when I was reading your Wikipedia, it said that you were the Iowa campaign coordinator. So was that like an early state director, or what did you do?
Yeah, so that was okay. So this is back in the days when like who the fuck knew what a title meant, because there were like five right like there were.
I was the Yang envoy. What even is that?
Right, exactly. So there were five people on the campaign, basically, and so I like kind of organized and volunteered as a student at Harvard, and then brought Andrew to come do an event on like the future of Asian American leadership in like fall of 2018. Because I was just like so confused. I was like, why is the Asian American community not embracing this historic candidacy?
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, whatever. I'm just gonna put this together. And then he asked me, he was like, all right, John, like, will you move to Iowa? And I was like, fuck no, like the like gay Jew, like Harvard law from New York, like I was like not like gonna survive or play well in the wonderful, beautiful state of Iowa. But like I realized like basically, and then I ended up like going that weekend. But like but like fundamentally, it was the same kind of question that I realized like when he decided to run in the first place. Again, the unlikeliest of all candidates. He sits down with Andy Stern and he's like, Andy, who's running on this? Someone has to be running on this. You wrote the damn book. You must know. Like someone must be running on
this. Book ends like that, where it's like, now someone needs to run for president on this. So
right. And then the answer was no. And so like that's like the unlikeliest thing of all is that Andrew went on a limb and decided to put himself out there. I think one of the things he said early on, which he was like, he accepted the possibility, if not probability, that he would be like shouting in the wind, a lone man, right? And still feel like he was doing the right thing. Oh, wow. And so I was like, oh shit, like if this guy with like a wife and two young kids, like did this, then I have to go freaking move to Iowa. Like, so I kind of just dropped everything and moved. And so at first it was Carly and me. And then it was basically, yeah, just me. And so I would drive like thousands of miles across the state, as you well know, and like go from Union Hall to school to like, and back then there were like, I don't know, 27 candidates running. And so you would walk into the room and it would be Marianne would speak, and then Amy Klobuchar, and then John Delaney and Eric Swalwell. And then I would speak and then like freaking make the pitch, like, you know, try to make those connections and move on. So the goal was to like build locally and just wear like 5 million hats.
So did you learn anything like Andrew's campaign was very unusual. They didn't follow like the standard playbook. Did you learn things from Andrew's campaign that's like kind of non-traditional that you're taking to yours?
Yeah, so I ended up so definitely all of the above. Like everything was unusual and truly like Carly and I had like set up in our early days like this Instagram account called like Startup Politics, because that's what it felt like. It was like we're all wearing a million hats and like doing like operations and finance and marketing and hiring and like figuring out this entire presidential political world, like, you know, by like reverse engineering it. But like what was challenging is really mostly on a personal level. Like it was the most fulfilling, amazing work. Like you know, by the time he was on Rogan, and like made the debate. Like it was just so incredible to see that vision, like of the tribe of reason. Oh no!
I've been having.
This guy's falling.
Okay. You still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. That was such an epic mic too. I need to get me one of those.
Not your fault.
Yeah, but so it was like so challenging on a personal level because I'd never been more like lonely and isolated and just like, yeah, I mean, every day it was just so like, it felt like a true like blessing for the movement and like a curse, like personally. But yeah, I mean, just basically doing all of the like functions of like an organization and building it.
Okay.
And you loved it so much that you wanted to do it for yourself in New York again, right?
No, well, honestly, like, I think the thing is, it's like, can you win? Can you make a difference by doing it? And will you regret it if you don't? And like, my answer was like, yes, by all of those. Because like, there's nowhere else I could plausibly run for Congress and win. Like, again, like being this like, you know, like Harvard educated gay Jew from like son of immigrants, like that just doesn't play anywhere other than literally like the gayest, most Jewish district in the entire country. And like disproportionately like higher educated. It's just my home where I grew up. And so I was like, you know, there actually was this like pocket of like, we can actually win. And so I was like, I'm going to hate myself if we didn't use this moment and actually like win on this agenda.
That's awesome. Yeah. And that's kind of when, you know, how I decided to run too. It was just like, I can run. I'll probably get the message out if I do run. And there's no, like, the thing with out here is nobody's talking about any of these issues remotely, like not even close. And again, thank you for what you're doing, because I know it's not easy by any means, especially, I mean, even just getting on the ballot, like people don't understand how hard it is to get 5,000 signatures. Like I only needed to get, I only got a couple hundred to get on my ballot. And then there was a filing fee. But just the signatures is a task in itself. So thank you for that. We need more people running like you. And, again, I just appreciate it. I'm running through my head everything that went through my race, and I'm looking at what you're doing right now. So again, it's for you to do that for Andrew Yang's campaign and then turn around and also, you know, start from scratch again in New York is huge.
So I'll say, like, you know, like very, very selfishly, and it took me like a lot of reflection being out in Iowa, like alone on the like contemplative nights, like freaking like New Year's and Christmas, like lying on the couch. I'm like, what am I doing? Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Like, why? Like, no one's heard of this guy. No one's talking. Like, you know, all these things. And I know, Heidi, you're like same. But on so many levels, and I think, Heidi, you've like talked about this really compellingly too, but like, especially being in this like bizarre world of like the higher education bubble, like there's all this like faux progressivism and virtue signaling and just like cancel culture, and it's very easy to like think to yourself, or, you know, for me to think, oh, I'm immune to that, right? Like that's the others, and like find my own little island of like my own little haven in, I don't know, like the Sam Harris, Eric Weinstein, whatever have you in the world, and like in the marketplace of ideas, right? Yeah. But the reality is it does affect you, like if that's what you're entirely surrounded by. And I realized that, like, I remember in the early days of the campaign, Andrew was like, okay, John, like, can you draft an email to like introduce yourself as like, you know, the fact that you're leaving and like kind of moving to Iowa and like why the fuck you're doing this. And I like drafted it and I sent him a draft, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was so embarrassing to look at now. It was like, I like basically framed all my trauma and all my like hardship and like, and it's all true and personal and like a big part of the reason why I felt this was so urgent and so important to do. But he sent back this really simple reply being like, too dark, let's lighten up. And right. And this was literally like me being like, here's my story. Like,
oh, that breaks my heart.
but like the like magic, the power, the like incredible like personal gain and uplifting and empowerment is like reframing everything in the context of like moving forward is just so fucking powerful and so rare to have someone lead by example in not like ranking the hierarchy of virtue and trauma and victimization, but really leading by example and saying like we have to move everyone forward. And that like you can't teach that. You can't like.
No, he froze.
Oh, we lost him again.
He's smiling though. All right, you froze. You said you can't teach that. ...
Oh, sorry.
It froze again. So you said you can't teach that, and then it froze.
Oh yeah, it's just like that. That is what political courage and leadership by example looks like. When you don't take that opportunism in that moment, when you make that marginal decision, then like it just opens up so many people to like reframe their own, even just their own personal narrative, in a more positive way. Anyway, just a little like tidbit, but
you say you can't teach that, but you just taught me about it. So
yeah,
maybe that's something I could have done better.
That's what I love about this movement, though, is like it's constantly like your mind is blown. I'm like, oh wow, so I've learned about Roberto Unger, and then no, I love this all so much because I'm always learning like it's such a very open and welcoming movement. Like I was a burner for 4 years, and I know it's the progressive movement, but to me it was so like it was almost authoritarian in that you had a prescribed way that you should be, that people had their lanes and you had to stay in them, that your voice mattered less, your struggle mattered less, and you must understand that. And so coming over to the the Yang Gang and this movement, it's just like I feel like I'm a person again that has a voice that matters, and I feel like I can learn from other people without necessarily feeling like there are walls up between me and that other person. Like I can share my life and they can share their life, and it's not like you're sharing to build a wall, it's sharing to tear down a wall. So that's why I love like this whole thing so much, and why I think that, and I love your thoughts on it, that I think that our movement will actually end up being the movement that becomes the overall progressive movement versus this I'm not saying it right, but versus this more authoritarian kind of left that we're also kind of seeing emerging. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I have loved and just so appreciated your like vulnerable and honest reflections on this, because I think we all share some like part of this in our narrative and our even like our political and evolution and so on. But I think this is, to me, not to like harken back to Unger, but he kind of framed that for me as, again, like deep freedom versus shallow equality, as well as
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Like fighting for equality of what he calls agency and empowerment, as opposed to equality of outcome. And I was at first like, what is agency? What is empowerment? But then you think about it and you're like, it's so radical, like truly radical, truly progressive, to think that each and every person like has within them, like as he puts it, like the potential to let the past, not define the future, and become and like live and enjoy the bigness of life.
Yeah.
And it sounds so like fluffy and kind of mushy, but like when you actually live it and like see the power of this and like, you know, and real like people's lives, it's like crazy. It's just really crazy how different a model that is from the alternative.
I like that.
Yes, I'm still. I have to look that guy up because it all sounds awesome, and like you said, it's right on point for exactly what the movement I think is trying to work towards. So, again, Roberto Unger, as spoken by Jonathan Herzog. So, Jonathan, any other thoughts or anything you want to leave us with? Anything else you want to any messages you want to get out to the audience?
Oh gosh. I guess I'll say freaking like love you guys and thank you for fighting the fight, because I know especially like after after the campaign and everything, it's like we have to like recollect and regather and like rejoin and like do it ourselves. Like there was I think there was that video that came out, and it was like, we've brought it to the mainstream. We've brought it to the national conversation. Now it's on us. And that literally means all of us, right? And each and every single way. And so like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy what we really can do. And like in my particular, in my particular instance, like what consumes my kind of time and energy around this race, like we can fucking win. Like we don't have to settle for like interesting group of people that drives the conversation. Like we can win.
Yeah, I don't want to be having this conversation for 30 years.
Right?
We may not even be here in 30 years. There's no reason that
we got other stuff to do.
Like what Andrew has always said, like I heard his stump speech like 9,000 times in January alone. But he's like, I just want to get in there for 8 years and do the work and then get out of there. And there's no reason you can't, right? It's because people make it a career and they go and crouch for 30 years. And if they actually got anything done, we wouldn't need them there, So I guess I have one final question. Do you kind of have that same ideology where you feel like you want to go in and make a difference and then get out? Or what is your feeling about what your service would look like as a congressman?
Yeah, I mean, 10,000%. That's like, again, one of the rare beauties of our movement and like the Humanity First platform, which like includes, I think, necessarily term limits, both like judicial and legislative, is that like Andrew really, but like we agree to these self-limiting principles of governance, right? And it's like, and like these are the kind of values and like self-protections we have that are like really deeply American, right? But like absolutely, right? Like there is no point in playing by like one set of values and rules and then like promoting like another, right? Like that is exactly the goal and should be across the board.
Very good.
I agree. If I ever, that was my thing too. Like I didn't want to get in there and run for years and decades and, like 8 years, it was my cap, if and when. So again, I think that's something across the board that resonates with a lot of us. Like we want to make an impact right away, and it is not all about us. It's more about making an impact, helping others, humanity first, just getting these things done. It's not about, our people getting there forever. Like if we can get it done in a month or two, like we'll get it done in a month or two. If it takes a few years, cool. But so again, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Again, Jonathan is running for Congress in New York's 10th district. You can find him at herzog2020.com. If you are able to donate, please donate. If you're able to volunteer, please volunteer, especially with a lot of us having a lot more time on our hands. Please please help because that makes a world of difference in these races. And on Twitter, I got it up now, Jonathan Herzog 5 on Twitter. So Heidi, Jonathan, any last words before we go?
Google Roberto Unger.
Yeah.
I'm doing as soon as I
I love it. You guys are awesome. And I'm stoked to making this master plan, James, for Heidi's run. Don't tell her.
It's happening. We'll file and we'll just be like, surprise, you're on the ballot.
Yeah, I love it.
No turning back now.
we
would though.
I don't want to be here any longer than I have to.
All right, the people have spoken.
We'll do a poll. We'll do a poll on Twitter, and then that'll decide it. So, again, thank you, Jonathan, for joining us. As always, Heidi Vets for Yang is with us, and my name is James Ellers. This has been another episode of The Gang Saves Humanity, and we will check in with you all soon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jonathan.